So we are using the new render setup system that will replace the normal legacy render layers, which was the default system of Maya. And the new approach simplifies the management of complex scenes rendering. I'll explain the workflow. So the rendering in passes gives you precise control over the color of objects and the shadows that fall on them. Typically, your render in passes to render various attributes such as color, shadows, highlights of the scene separately. You can fine-tune a scene without re-rendering it by modifying different passes in a compositing program. So what is the speciality of render passes is you are subdividing your rendering. You can individually control each parts and details of rendering, like highlights, shadows, specular, diffuse, all can be individually edited and controlled and composited using a compositing program like Adobe After Effects, Foundry Nuke. So while coming to passes, the first one is the default beauty pass. We are getting a default render layer, master layer, and we are rendering the scene, and the default pass can be attributed as beauty pass. So it produces a complete rendering of the components provided by a shadow pass and a color pass. Because the color passes produces complete rendering of the components produced by diffuse pass and specular pass. The beauty pass ends up producing a complete rendering in all possible components. You can see this display graph. By default, beauty pass consists of shadow pass and color pass. And the color pass is having diffuse pass and specular pass. And by using render layers, different render layers, we will be subdividing the rendering and we will be getting different passes like shadow pass separate, diffuse pass separate, specular pass separate. And for combining, you will be compositing all the passes together in a compositing program. If it's a single image, you can composite in Adobe Photoshop. If it's an image sequence like a video file, you have to composite using a compositing program like Adobe After Effects or Foundry Nuke or Digital Fusion. There are lots of compositing programs are there. Even if you are using Blender, the 3D package Blender is inbuilt having the compositing options. So I'll be adding a pass in our layer now. Come to this AOV's options in the Arnold render settings. You can find about different passes added here. Find out the diffuse pass here. If you render now, first you start with the diffuse pass. Then shadow matte is there. Even specular pass is there. I'll be adding a specular pass. So right now, I'll go to Arnold render view. I'll be rendering the scene. You can find out different passes here in Arnold render view. Default diffuse pass is there. The diffuse is not casting any specularities. So it's the default beauty pass, which will have all the render passes combined together with the specular So what is the specialty is like you can individually control your render when you start working and compositing with all these render passes, which will give the quality of animation render a perfection of lighting. So we will come to more advanced topics. First, you start with at least 4 passes: the diffuse, shadow. So same like you can render it, even specular I am rendering, and we have to render another pass for occlusion. So I will come to that. So just cover up shadow pass, color pass, diffuse pass, specular pass, and occlusion. Okay. This is the diffuse pass, this is the specular pass, because it is getting the specularity. So is it clear? So now I am coming to occlusion pass, how to render an occlusion. Just select the geo group, add a shader. So you can find out ambient occlusion AI, the type of shader. Load it ambient occlusion, take a render, the occlusion is coming. We render again. I'm getting the color pass, adding the diffuse, adding the shadow matte, adding the specular. In AOVs, we will take diffuse, shadow matte, and specular, and the occlusion pass is a separate pass, which will be added with the occlusion shader. So right now, I got a diffuse pass here. I can check whether apply gamma and alpha. I'll enable everything here, then I can save the image. And if you want to get uncompressed alpha image, better to save it in TIFF or TGA. So I'm going to save it as a TGA format, TUGF image specular. So right now, these are the 4 passes which we need: diffuse, occlusion, shadow, and specular. And while coming to the presentation of your next assignment, individually you need to render each passes, and you have to explain each pass separately for both lighting, day lighting and night lighting, on the coming assignment. You don't need to render the beauty now, and I'm going to composite this using Photoshop. So the first pass, this is the diffuse pass. I'll be loading the occlusion. You could find out now. Here, this is the diffuse, and I have made the occlusion. And for occlusion, for getting that proper composited out, you have to change the blending mode to multiply. So each will have each effects. The blending modes will be having each kinds of effects which can be enabled by changing the modes. You can reduce the opacity. You will get a metallic feel. And if you have any environment to get the reflection, you have to add another pass for reflection. So individually, you need to check all the passes. So this is the default diffuse pass, occlusion, shadow, than specular. If I need more sharpness or more details of specular, I can add different kinds of options which can be edited here, or even I can add the adjustments, levels, curves, exposure. We want to increase the brightness of that specular area. I can make the contrast and brightness more here. You have to rectify the doubts and you have to make a perfect render with a good quality of lighting.